We all know rock and roll, but how did it become so popular? To understand that, we have to travel back to before the 1950s, when people owned phonograph records, which were big, expensive, and easily breakable. Because of this, most families only owned one phonograph player that typically stayed in a communal room so everyone could listen to music. This led to families buying records that would appeal to the whole family. Everything changed when in the 1950s records became smaller, cheaper, and better quality, allowing people to have record players in their own room. Not only were records improving, but radios too. Radios became smaller and cheaper, allowing them to be put into cars. For the first time in history, people could listen to whatever music they wanted, which split music into two demographics, adults and teens. Radio stations and record companies started making music targeted towards adults and teens separately. Radio stations noticed that white teens in the metropolitan area were tuning into popular black radio stations that played rhythm and R&B. In an attempt to keep their audience, white-owned radio stations started playing R&B songs like Shake, Rattle, Roll by Big Joe Turner. White record companies, thinking white teens would not buy records of black performers, started looking for white singers to sing something similar to R&B. Hence the birth of a mixture of country and R&B, also known as rock and roll. Influential figures. Most people think of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, when they think about the origins of rock and roll, but no one person can take the credit for its creation. Elvis, however, can take credit for rockabilly. Rockabilly, meaning rock and roll played by hillbillies, was an early form of rock and roll in which white people from the South mixed country music with rhythm. This was first introduced by Elvis when he sang "That's All Right, Mama," a song by African-American blues musician Arthur Big Boy Crumdup. Elvis's high tenor voice mixed with the original blues made it an instant hit and kicked off his career. From 1956 through 1958, he completely dominated the pop music charts and ushered in the age of rock and roll, opening doors for both white and black rock artists. He inspired thousands of musicians to follow in his footsteps, as well as influencing his audience's clothing, hair, motivations with his flamboyant style and personality.
Another major figure includes Chuck Berry, also known as the father of rock and roll. Chuck Berry was an African-American guitar player who started his career by playing in a blues band called Sir John's Trio that played at black nightclubs. Berry revitalized the band and introduced upbeat country numbers into the band's repertoire of jazz and pop music. The band became so popular that white people started going to the black nightclubs he played at. In 1955, he went to Chicago for a record deal with Chess Records, which he got with his song Maybelline. It reached number 1 on R&B charts and number 5 on the pop charts. It was the first ever rock and roll song. He influenced many artists and showed that race does not matter when it comes to good music.
Plaid and bowling shirts, jet black jeans, and two-tone brogues or chunky boots. At the dawn of rock and roll in the 1950s, the movie industry in the United States was running scared. People often preferred to stay at home and watch television instead of going out to the movies. Movie studios spent money to attract teenagers to movies that matched their interest. These movies that produced to fit teenager interests were called exploitation movies. The films generally centered on the lives of teenagers and, of course, the newest teenage music craze, rock and roll. The 1955 film Blackboard Jungle is one of the most influential films. The film tackles teenage issues and was the first film to feature rock songs, spurring the production of similar rock music films. While rock and roll inspired change in the American fashion and movie industry, this music also encouraged racial cooperation and diminished social segregation as white children found themselves to be enjoying rock and roll that's produced by African-American musicians. The lyrics sparked feelings of sympathy amongst the American youth. Under the effort of the musicians and American youth, rock and roll created a political voice in the country.